A man walks into a bar with a white plastic bucket. No one recognized him. Andrea, the Chilean waitress, leaned in and said to me, "That man, he looks like a real scumbucket." And I laughed and I wished she'd say it again. But when he placed the bucket on one of the shaky tables, Sophia, the wife of the bar owner O'Malley, yelled, "Holy fuck, a little baby alligator!" She flipped her wet rag over her shoulder and leaned in. We crowded around, as many of us that could, trying to get our heads near the opening of this white plastic bucket. There it was, as prehistoric as we'd hoped, green as a lizard should be, the color of the swamp, bulbous, jelly eyes lifted above the water, not as ridiculous as a slug stalks. And O'Malley, huddled around the bucket with us, turned his shoulders out, I could tell, to create just enough space that another slim body might enter it. And it is difficult to say if his wife, Sophia, noticed that the invitation was not for her, but for Andrea, who hadn't followed us yet to the bucket. Andrea, who took one glance into the bucket before shrieking and throwing her hands up and cowering in the countertop frame between the bathrooms, eyes shining black between little fingers. There were 7 of us crammed around that bucket, and a little blonde boy was the one who slid in against O'Malley, taking the spot intended for Andrea, but he was too short to even see inside. But we looked, and that baby alligator did what we wanted it to, at least at first, in that it was itself an alligator in miniature form. It could bite, of course, and it would hurt, and we've all heard about those jaws snapping shut and never opening until death, and not even then, but still it was just a baby, barely 8 inches long. But it was not a baby as we are all babies, where, oh, its eyes are like it, oh, she has his mother's feet, and oh, it has the hands of a drummer. They're all fine and dandy games, but really we're just lumps of flesh, sloughed from some unfinished mold, but not this baby alligator. It was already exactly what it was. And it had only to double, triple, quadruple in size, grow, 10x, 100x, a question only of scale. How much enormity could become of this same this until it was a full-grown giant of the swamp? "Feed it," said the blonde boy without ceremony, the thing we all wanted to say. And O'Malley said, "Manners, boy," but then O'Malley's eye twitched, which was as good of a nod as a nod from him. Our breathing became heavy. "Feed it," we begged, because this baby alligator isn't moving. It's just sitting there. We don't have all day. It wasn't that our sense of wonder was spent already. It was just that we had nothing more to talk about, because the wonder of watching something that doesn't move is introspective, branched, convoluted as evolution itself, filled with all the metaphoric self-revelations we have whenever contemplating the immobile, the pattern on floor tiles, the petals of a flower, the ocean. For the ocean, though it moves, also does not move. The elements reorganize in our minds into new patterns resembling the "Feed the damn thing," said O'Malley, making us all jump at the bucket slosh so the alligator still didn't move. "It's got to be hungry," he said. Now the other side of the bar, watching, Andrea blushed, and O'Malley's wife nodded at the alligator, but did not acknowledge her husband. The man who brought the alligator in the white plastic bucket, no one had yet asked him his name, pulled out an inflated plastic bag with a pair of weightless goldfish. Each had a strip of black running vertically at the edge of its tail, up to the tip, where one of them was torn. So if you noticed this bite mark, you felt instant pity for this fish and anger towards the other one. We all knew it was up to O'Malley to decide which fish would he choose to die. If he suggested the predatory goldfish, he was showing Andrea he was sworn to justice, eye for an eye, fin for a life, and he was sentimental towards those pitiable ones who bore the brunt of their own weaker natures. And yet, if he chose the goldfish already accustomed to being prey, Andrea might see his sadism only, and not the adherence to the natural order O'Malley was trying to observe, though it was also possible that his sadism would excite her, even as she cowered, even as she watched between her fingers. But before O'Malley could even make his choice, the boy yelled, "Put them both in so we can see what she goes for." And the man emptied the bag into the bucket. Down in the hole, the alligator's body curved against the inside of the scratched bucket. The fish swung about, past each other, past the alligator's open eyes, past the tips of its protruding teeth. But the alligator never opened its mouth as I imagined it, slowly, ratcheting open micrometers at a time, barely noticeable, until you're surrounded by teeth inside that mouth, waiting for that snap. How fast, how strong will that snap really be? But then O'Malley's wife's voice reminds me that the two fish are just swimming in circles on the opposite side of the bucket, and the alligator hasn't moved a goddamn muscle. "Oh, for Pete's sake," she huffs, throwing her hands up, and O'Malley sighs, half a growl. "Yeah, always poor Pete," he grumbles. And his wife leaves the circular porthole of the bucket for the smaller ones at the bottom of the glass as she dumps into the hot sink. shaking, drying, holding out before her, closing one eye and looking through each sheet of glass, each a unique porthole from which to see the rest of the bar. The crooked looks of her husband, the movements of Andrea and the rest of the help they'd hired to give them more time to themselves. Andrea's hand-covered eyes watching Sophia's husband watch the alligator. And I saw O'Malley and his wife for the first time with absolute clarity. You see, Sophia thought that by expressing her exasperation, O'Malley would agree, and they'd be able to storm off together, leaving Andrea in the corner by herself. But O'Malley only became frustrated with his wife's frustration, so typical, so impatient, and scolded her by looking across the bar to that young waitress who wants to be a dancer over there. I wondered if O'Malley would have that moment that I'd once had, sitting in a similar cracked stool in a similar dim bar, if a slow sinking could even be called a moment. The realization that love for another can reach a dangerous paradox. Sophia's, "Oh, for Pete's sake," and O'Malley's sigh was just like my wife Angie's, "Jesus Christ," and my "Jesus Christ what?" Hi, Angie. Her expression of frustration followed by my frustration at her frustration. And it was often the other way around, where I'd express an innocent frustration and she'd get flustered trying to solve it, and eventually we'd be yelling at each other in a fight that would last until dream, as I'm sure I'd see happen to Sophia and O'Malley if I kept watching. It comes from our desire to tell our lover all the things that bother us, often in sequences triggered by an immediate cause, but reaching back through time. Damn this lazy alligator, and speaking of, damn these slippery glasses, and damn these dim light bulbs, and damn the coldness of ice, etc., etc. They're only expressions of frustration, translating to, honey, darling love, it's me. I am being honest now. These are my unedited and uncensored frustrations, and I desire you to be frustrated with me as if we were the only two in agreement against the entire world. But this poorly articulated desire, this, "Oh, for Pete's sake," when it hits an ear like O'Malley's, it becomes confused with the need to solve your lover's problems, to take upon yourself that threat which degrades the happiness of the person you've sworn to keep happy. So O'Malley here is only blame. The complaint taking on the precedent of "because of you," or "maybe if you'd have," such as, "maybe if you'd been a better husband, this alligator would eat the goddamn fish, or else you'd have had the forethought to keep it out of our bar, or else you'd have better prepared me philosophically through the course of our relationship for dealing with so much goddamn disappointment." Now, I know, of course, that it was not my fault that the power in our entire apartment block went out, ruining the eggs Angie had been cooking. And O'Malley knows it's not his fault that the alligator isn't lunging for the fish, as of course Sophia knows this too. But O'Malley's instinct that she has no right to blame him for something he can't control further aggravates him. And Sophia's knowledge that he'll just take her exclamation as a personal insult further aggravates her. And so it goes, in a terrible cycle, until the bed at bedtime becomes too large and the sheets between you cold. And it takes until well into the night for her to finally articulate to him that she was simply expressing her dissatisfaction, in the hopes that O'Malley would acknowledge and agree, and they'd be one moment closer to each other, instead of apart, as they are now, with Andrea still looking from behind the wooden frame near the bathrooms, towards the alligator's bucket, but not at me, because I had also stepped away and back to my table. Later, after relieving the man of his plastic bucket with its baby alligator, now sitting beneath my table, with what felt like the ghost of the girlfriend who would become my wife hovering above my hand, I wondered if we'd ever get past that argument that had set me here, into this situation where I would become the proud owner of a baby alligator I had no idea what to do with. A baby alligator that swished its tail among the flakes of golden scales that had once been fish, for of course the alligator had mauled them when we weren't looking. And instead of imagining what my girlfriend would think of living with a baby alligator in a bathtub, or how long it would take before I was the unknown man in another bar across town offering a baby alligator in a white plastic bucket to the first ticket, I instead scribbled curiously into my notebook an explanation of how two lovers' desire for both sharing and service are, and will always be, at least in the moment they are expressed, completely adversarial. And how it is with love that we enter into this paradox, and with love also that we will always try to overcome it, and always fail, only to try, and fail, and try, and fail. Thanks.